If I were in charge of designing a Mount Rushmore for horror movie actors, performers that are so closely associated with the horror genre that they basically created it, there are a few people that would have to be there. We'd have to have Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, even Lon Chaney Jr. But one man, especially for me in particular, stands tall in the horror genre, and that is Mr. Vincent Price. Coming up in this video, Icons of Horror, Vincent Price. Welcome to Serial at Midnight, the official YouTube channel of serialatmidnight.com. My name is Heath, and I'm glad you're here because this is the Icons of Horror Vincent Price video. I'm so excited about this. Vincent Price is one of my absolute favorites. Not just horror movie actors, but one of my, as you can tell from my shirt, one of my favorite actors just in general. And what I love about Vincent Price's career is that there's serious stuff. He was obviously a dramatic, theatrical actor. You can go back to some of his older movies, noir films, especially stuff in the 40s. A very great, serious actor. And then his career took him to some really crazy places. And within the horror genre, he just did some bonkers things. And it makes me love him so much more because here's a man who clearly had this talent and this ability, who wasn't afraid to be in some really absurd movies. Maybe by necessity, but also just like, he's just such a diverse guy, such an interesting, unique weirdo. I love the weirdos. Let's be honest about it. Vincent Price is a super weirdo. But this is not going to be a study in Vincent Price. This is not academic. This is me talking to you about my Vincent Price collection. Okay, so if I leave something out, it's probably because I didn't have it or I like to show you things. I like to show you my collection. I like to show you my movies, and we talk about them so I can give you my personal experience with them. So remember, this is not a crash course on Vincent Price. This is me just talking to you about some of the stuff that I have by Vincent Price. So with that being said, we got to talk about the Vincent Price Collection, Volume 1. This was a mother-loving game changer, you guys. This release from Scream Factory, Shout Factory, is epic. It's sent out of print. It's going for a lot of money. I'm so glad I have it. Not because, like, I could probably sell this and make hundreds of dollars, but I don't want to. I want to watch these movies. Like, these things are magnificent movies. This release has The Pit and the Pendulum, The Mask of Red Death, The Haunted Palace, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Abominable Dr Phibes, ooh, one of the great ones, and Witchfinder General, aka The Conqueror Worm. Now, what this is so we got to talk about Vincent Price's Edgar Allan Poe period. For Roger Corman at American International Pictures. I freaking love American International Pictures, one of my absolute favorite movie houses. The 60s and the 70s, the grindhouse movies, the exploitation, less grindhouse, more exploitation, just like the beach movies and the horror movies, and what Hammer was doing in the UK in the late 50s, early 60s, early to mid 60s. That's what American International Pictures really took off doing around the same time. The American version of that is just that very, like, give the people what they want. And in the process, you know, I was watching some special features the other day. In the process, these studios, like Hammer and American International Pictures, accidentally created art. I don't think that's what they were going for. I think they were going for ticket sales, just get some butts and some seats and make some money. And they ended up having these phenomenal personalities like Vincent Price, some phenomenal settings. They reflect their time. You look back on them now, they're art. Whether they intended to be or not, which they didn't, they're now art. And so they are fantastic little movies. The American International catalog, in my top 5. Canon, American International, Hammer, I don't even know who the other ones are. But I love this stuff. And so the Edgar Allan Poe movies really were the first foray for American horror movies into this bloodier, gorier, very subversive horror. The horror, and here it's weird because like the horror in the 30s had been like the early 30s, like Dracula and The Mummy and all this stuff. They were kind of hardcore. Like if you go back and watch those movies, the earlier ones definitely hardcore. Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, super subversive. And then the censors kind of get involved, and by the time of the 50s, listen, I love 50s horror. But by the time of the 50s, it's gotten kind of safe. There's a lot of stuff that they don't want to do on screen, so a lot of it ends up happening off screen. Then these movies, the American International, Hammer stuff comes along, showing super red blood, really just showing you stuff and pushing the limits. So The Pit and the Pendulum is great. The Mask of Red Death, absolutely fantastic. The Haunted Palace, that's good. The Fall of the House of Usher. We got to talk about The Abominable Dr. Phibes. That is such a psychedelic masterpiece of horror. The places that movie goes to, and that was the 70s, right? Yeah, 1971. That was really a whole new area for horror, and I love it. And you know what? Talking about it, I'm going to have to revisit this. Every year I try to revisit these movies, and it often doesn't happen. Witchfinder General as well, really creepy movie. Is a very interesting story behind that movie too. And this release is absolutely loaded with special features. It has these rare introductions, these prologues that were done for public television decades ago, and they were kind of lost for a long time, and they were rediscovered, and they're on here. And there's also really great commentaries and documentaries by people who know exactly what they're talking about. And then we move on to the Vincent Price Collection Volume 2. The Raven, we're back in Poe territory. The Comedy of Terrors, The Tomb of Ligeia, Poe. The Last Man on Earth, which we'll talk about. Dr. Phibes Rises Again, the sequel to Dr. Phibes. The Return of the Fly, and House on Haunted Hill. So this release has some of my absolute favorite Vincent Price movies ever, particularly House on Haunted Hill. I adore House on Haunted Hill. It's so campy and goofy, but kind of, it's not innocent, but it has that very it's early 60s. It's 1959, so it's got that like 50s funhouse feel. There's like things popping out and stuff, but it's never mean, really. It's a little mean, but it's not coming for you. It's not scary mean. It's more fun. Kind of like the Universal monsters. Like, it's fun horror instead of just like, oh, that was disgusting horror. I first saw House on Haunted Hill on a public domain DVD, and I was like, I saw it, I was young, and so I was like, well, that's not scary. It was at that age where everything has to be scary to be horror. And so rediscovered it prior to this, but when this came out, this is the best. This Blu-ray of this is like a fantastic transfer. It's got some really cool audio commentary. It's got an audio commentary on it, documentary about Vincent Price. I love House on Haunted Hill. And it's kind of a quick movie. It's 75 minutes, so I may have to throw this one on too. I'm just going to end up watching all of these again. I do these icons of horror movies, or icons of horror videos, to talk to you about horror that I like. And it just like inspires me and makes me want to go watch those movies all over again. And there's no time. Come on. What? The Last Man on Earth. Let's talk about The Last Man on Earth. This is another one I first saw on a public domain DVD years and years ago. And it was very impressive. And what I didn't know about the movie at that point is that it's based on, it's a Richard Matheson's story, I Am Legend. The Last Man on Earth is an adaptation of I Am Legend. I think the first screen version of I Am Legend. And it's very good. Very good. Vincent Price drives a sweet car in this movie. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a fantastic car. And then I should also say that like Omega Man is another version of that story. Richard Matheson is an incredible sci-fi horror genre writer. Did some Star Trek work, but if you haven't read, and of course there's the adaptation with Will Smith of I Am Legend, which really ticked me off at the time. One, because of that scene towards the middle of the movie with a certain canine that really bothered me. Nobody gets actually hurt. It's not like they did animal violence or anything, but I can never rewatch that movie because of a certain scene. And also because they changed the end, and I feel like in changing the end completely destroyed the point of I Am Legend. Like, I Am Legend, it has a story. It's one of those morality tales. Like, it has a point. And I do not think that the Will Smith I Am Legend movie, he didn't direct it, but he's the star. I don't think it gets the point. And so The Last Man on Earth actually does. I think it's a really good story. It's a little bit different from the story too, but there you go. And then after that, I was like, well, it can't possibly get any better. And then we got this, the Vincent Price Collection Volume 3. This has Master of the World, Tower of London, which isn't really horror, in my opinion. You know what? I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm not an arbiter of what is and is not. For me, I don't really feel... I've watched Tower of London. I don't get a lot of horror from it. It feels more like a drama to me. But whatever. Diary of a Madman, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe, which again is not a movie. It's something else. And then Cry of the Banshee. Here's a true story. I bought this when this came out in I think it came out in 2015, but it might have been 2016. Let me see if I can find a date on the bottom of this very quickly. And I did 2016. Okay. I bought this in 2016 when it came out, and I still have not watched all of these movies. The struggle is real, you guys. This gets put on the shelf, and I'll take it down and be like, oh, I need to watch Cry of the Banshee. And then it just doesn't happen for whatever reason. And so I'm leaving it off the shelf this year. I'm going to take it, put it next to the TV, but I've got a stack of movies. You've seen the stuff that I need to watch, and there's just not enough time. But you know what? I watch this stuff all year round, so I don't have to wait for Halloween to watch these movies. Okay, so the rest of these, let's just fly through them. Haha, Fly. The Fly. Epic movie. Fantastic movie. This is another one that when I was younger, I thought was kind of stupid, which is wrong. It's criminal of me to have thought that about a Vincent Price movie. Because I had obviously I saw the Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis movie first. And I was like, oh, that movie's gross, and it's scary, and it's visceral. And then you watch this one, and there's like a fly that's like, help me. Help me. And you're like, what am I watching? How am I supposed to? But of its time, you got to put these things in their context. Don't want to be movie dad or anything like that, but I think it's important. I will just say, I think it's important that we try to watch movies on their terms, not on ours. Not meaning like, well, the movie, like I have to change everything about myself. But you got to try to put a movie in context of when it was made, what it's trying to do. We have a tendency to want to drag things to us. Movies don't change. Like movies stay fixed in a place in time. Like this movie was made in 1958, and it is a 1958 movie, and it will always be a 1958 movie. And as our perspective, as we get further from 1958, as we move through our life, our perspective on this changes. And so I think it's important to try to watch movies for what they are and not try to watch them for what they aren't. And that's something that I'm trying to constantly struggle with myself. That's why I revisit certain movies, like the recent I picked up the Peter Jackson King Kong movie, because I've watched that movie before and I didn't really like it. In fact, I very much didn't like it. But I have changed perspective since then, and I need to revisit it to see if I still feel that way, if I'm in the same place, because I'm not in the same place, and maybe I'll feel differently about it. The Fly is a movie that I did not like when I first saw it. I thought it was corny. I've since come to absolutely love it. I think it's fantastic. This is another one of those that's such a great Vincent Price role, and if you can get over if you can make allowances for things like special effects, it's a really cool story. It's just a really great story. So that's The Fly, and The Fly 2 was on one of these Vincent Price collections. House of Wax 3D. Now I have not watched this in 3D. I've only watched it in 2D, but this is an absolutely stunning movie. Very dark and violent. Remade, obviously, because we tend to remake everything now. Although I will say most of Vincent Price's movies have not been remade. They kind of exist on their own, which may be one of the things that I like about them the most, is we have not gotten, to my knowledge, there's no Dr. Phibes remake with like Michael Fassbender or something like that. Like it's its own thing. Like that's one of the things that appeals to me about Vincent Price, is that his movies exist in a time and a place, and they are distinctly Vincent Price movies. House of Wax is really good. If you haven't seen it, it's very creepy. It takes place in a house of wax. You can just imagine what's happening with a guy who operates a wax house and like what's going on in there. Because I don't want to spoil anything for you, but this has the 3D version and the 2D version. Commentary by David Delvallier, which is, you pronounce his name Delvallier, right? Because I would think it would be Delvallier, but it's not, it's Vallier. Anyway, he's great. He always knows what he's talking about. He shows up on a lot of Vincent Price stuff. David Delvallier is a guy that I actually really do like. He's one of those. Kim Newman. People have asked me in the past, are there any critics that I like? Critics, not so much, but there are enthusiasts that I tend to follow. David Delvallier is one of them. And Kim Newman is another one. There are more, but those are the ones. I'm looking at David Del Valle's name, so of course I'm thinking of him. And then, let's see. Two movies that I get confused all the time. Tales of Terror and Twice Told Tales. Now you can understand why I would get these confused, right? Twice Told Tales is a Nathaniel Hawthorne adaptation. Hawthorne being, one of the great American writers from a couple hundred years ago, an establishing American author. And this is an anthology of Nathaniel Hawthorne horror tales. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've watched this. I don't really remember a lot about it, so maybe I need to revisit it. I don't think there was anything here that was stunning, but it is good Vincent Price. It's in color. This is a Kino disc. I love Kino Lorber. There's another sale coming up pretty soon. I think it's going to be around October 22nd. And then the other disc is also Kino. This is Tales of Terror. And now this one has some more icons in it. This one also has Peter Lorre in it, and Basil Rathbone, who, if you haven't seen Basil Rathbone's Sherlock Holmes movies, do yourself a favor. They are fantastic. We'll have to do a whole video about Sherlock Holmes, the Sherlock Holmes Basil Rathbone movies. They're in a collected set on Blu-ray. $40-$50 somewhere in there. It's like 13 movies, something like that. We'll talk about it, but those are really good, and they have the same kind of B-movie horror kind of aesthetic going on. This is another one that is it's an anthology. I really shouldn't get these confused because they don't have the same cast, but it's that name, Twice Told Tales and Tales of Terror. And then wasn't there another one on one of these sets that's also Comedy of Terrors? So all these names get kind of... I have a hard time keeping some of this stuff straight. You guys know what I'm talking about? This is arguably not horror, but I decided to include it anyway. This is another one of those sweet Kino Lorber discs. This is War Gods of the Deep. There's another title for this. I can't remember what the other title is, but this is essentially guy goes to... It's kind of like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. There's like a madman under the earth. I'll read the back of it to you. Master of suspense and horror, Vincent Price, takes on the square-jawed Tab Hunter in this fantastic underwater tale teeming with adventure. Based on Edgar Allan Poe, Tales of Terror, story, and co-starring David Tomlinson and Susan Hart from Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. Another fantastic Vincent Price movie, but not horror. Let's see. This turbulent thriller puts Gill men against he-men with a sexy woman caught between and surges with excitement from initial fade-in to climactic fade-out. When a slimy gilled monster from the deep kidnaps the beautiful Jill, it takes her boyfriend, his sidekick, and his sidekick's sidekick, a rooster, to get her back. Following her trail into the deep, they are shocked to discover a lost underwater city ruled by a ruthless captain, Vincent Price. That was like Stewie. Vincent Price. Good evening. Good evening. I hope you will come to join me. War Gods of the Deep. And an army of mutated sea creatures who imprison the hapless landlubbers when a restless volcano threatens to bury them all. That was a very long-winded thing, but basically, yes, it's undersea, under the surface, monsters versus... It's very 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right? But I think it's close enough to horror. We can call this horror. Super fun movie. This is another... I think I said this is another Kino disc, and so Kino really... We have Kino to thank for a lot of this. We have the boutique labels to thank for these movies being on Blu-ray, because Shout Factory / Scream Factory, Kino Lorber. Let's continue. The Oblong Box. Edgar Allan Poe's classic Tale of the Living Dead. Vincent Price and Christopher Lee. What? This is another one that I've watched. I enjoyed. I don't remember a ton about it, so I'm going to not talk too much about it. But I did like it. Like anything with Vincent Price is fantastic. This is from 1969. So we have a very dashing-looking Vincent Price. It's good. All the Poe stuff, varying degrees of good, but Edgar Allan Poe, another great American author, early pioneer of horror, like pre-Lovecraft. Edgar Allan Poe is wonderful, and I think a lot of us went through an Edgar Allan Poe phase. I certainly did when I was in, I think I was in 7th, 8th grade, maybe into early high school was my Edgar Allan Poe phase. Just a couple more here that I'm going to talk to you about. The House of the Long Shadows. This is a movie worth watching for its cast. This has Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and Peter Cushing. All three of those guys probably ended up on the Mount Rushmore of horror, right? The Mount Rushmore is getting bigger and bigger. It's now like the whole mountain. But you have to, right? Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, iconic equally as Vincent Price. But this movie is... I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling it, so I'm going to try to dance around some stuff. It's a horror movie, but it's not really a horror movie. Like it's a canon movie that doesn't commit to what it's trying to do. Do I want to tell you more than that? It's a horror movie in which people get killed and then maybe they're not dead. Maybe I've said too much. But it's got who's the kid in this? Desi Arnaz Jr. That's who's. So it's Lucy and Desi's kid, Desi Arnaz Jr. And I gotta be honest with you, he is not like, you got these three powerhouses in this movie, and then Desi Arnaz Jr. And it's like he's so in over his head. But the movie, for what it is, like, it's fun. And there's a scene at the end of the movie, again, not spoiling anything, but Vincent Price ad-libs a line to Christopher Lee and calls... I try to keep things family friendly here, but Vincent Price calls Christopher Lee the B word. The word that you call... that's reserved for females. The female dog word. That's what we'll say. He calls him that, and it's like an ad-lib on the set. Which is hilarious and totally Vincent Price. And so it's in the movie. It got left in the movie. And Christopher Lee, of course, is just like... Gandalf, I cannot believe you called me the word that you called me, Gandalf. It was okay. I don't feel great about that, but that was okay. Last but not least, last but kind of Madhouse. This is another... all of these are Kino Lorber Blu-rays. And so, again, Kino Lorber sale coming up soon. It's not a Halloween sale, but it is a sale coming up. And if you're interested in some of this stuff, I think it's all still on print. Madhouse. Vincent Price and Peter Cushing. Again, this is late Vincent Price. This is... well, it's not as late as I thought it was. It's 1974. I was thinking it was closer to the end of the 70s. But it's 1974. We got like some sweet sideburns. And it is... It is that. It is like Vincent Price plays like a horror movie actor. It's kind of meta. So Vincent Price is playing a horror movie actor. Let's see. When horror star Paul Toombs' fiance is brutally killed, he loses more than his job. He loses his mind. But 12 years after suffering a nervous breakdown, the washed-up horror legend, Vincent Price. Hey Brian, Vincent Price. You like Vincent Price? Vincent Price has lost his mind. Yes. Okay. He agrees to do a TV series based on his old screen creation, the monstrous Dr. Death. That was better. I feel better about that one. Soon the cast and crew of the series begin dying in ways similar to the deaths the characters suffered in the actors' old movies. This is an American International picture. Did I mention that House of Long Shadows is a canon movie? Canon. Remember I said that they would be in my top... they're one of my top movie houses. American International. So, you see, it's all symmetrical. It's all circular. It's not great. It's fun, though. And I will say, there was a replacement disc for this. There were some problems with it. I honestly do not remember what the problems were at this point. I could look it up on the internet. But this is my... oh, it has syncing issues. That's what it was, because I wrote myself a note on the back of this. This is original disc with sync issues, meaning that the picture and the sound were not in sync. And so they did give a replacement disc for this. I assume it's all been thoroughly taken care of now. But if you are going to buy Madhouse, I guess keep an eye out for sync issues. Guys, that is really what I have to talk about. I do have more Vincent Price movies, but I either did not pull them, or I did not think that they were really prime Vincent Price, or like in the case of Dr. Goldfoot in the Bikini Machine, fantastically fun movie that is not really horror. And then there's the AIP Beach movies, again, not horror. So trying to focus on horror. We will have to do a career overview of Vincent Price at some point, because golly, I love Vincent Price. A shout out to Edward Scissorhands. Tim Burton put Vincent Price in there near the end of the actor's life, because he is obviously a huge father of horror. Nobody did what Vincent Price does. That he would do this like Baroque style. We call it the Baroque period of Vincent Price, because there are periods of Vincent Price. You have like the earnest, sincere, theatrical Vincent Price, and then by the time of like the mid-60s and into the 70s, he is playing a cartoon character very, very willingly. Like, he is just ridiculously over the top. Like, oh, this is 10, like all the way at the top. No subtlety, no nuance, just cashing those checks, man. And that's, so many people like me love that. And so I absolutely adore Vincent Price. I don't really want to stop talking about this and in the video, but I feel I must, because I'm out of DVDs and Blu-rays to talk about. Do you have a favorite Vincent Price movie that maybe I didn't talk about in this? Is there anything that you need to check out? Are there any movies on the third volume of the Vincent Price collection, that Master of the World, Cry of the Banshee, Diary of a Madman, that you think are worth checking out before others? So really, that is it. I want to thank you for hanging out, talking some Vinnie P with me. Guys, I do appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time. So thanks for, I haven't done this in a while. All the social media links to these, to my presence, I'm active every single day in the comments of the videos, on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. Serial at Midnight, regardless of whether a new video has dropped that day or not, I'm hard at work, engaging, creating new things. Check out serialatmidnight.com. There's a ton of written features there that I don't talk about here on the channel. It's a completely separate thing. Written reviews. I reference you to I did a series of Mummy. I called it Mummy Mania, and I watched all 5 of the original Mummy movies, the Universal horror Mummer movies, with finished on the 6th. Abbott and Costello meet the Mummy. And it was last year. I did that last year. This year I'm facing time crunches because I'm doing 3 videos a week. And let me tell you, YouTube advice, it's hard to do 3 videos a week in your spare time. But there are those 6 Mummy columns on there. And if you keep your eyes on the Facebook page, on the Serial at Midnight Twitter feed, I'm going to be dropping content from the past, things that I've worked on, and maybe I know for a fact that a lot of you guys haven't seen it. So I'm going to be resharing some older stuff. No monster serials this year. I think I have topped. I can't top my Captain or my Count Chocula video that I made last year. So if you haven't seen that and you want to see the Serial at Midnight take on Count Chocula, there's an entire playlist of serial reviews on the YouTube channel, so check that out. But I will let you go, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for hanging out with me, talking to Vinnie P. I appreciate you so much more than you will ever know. So thank you, and I will catch you, and I will catch you later. No, and I will catch you later.